Hi everyone, today is the 25th of November and where I live it's getting really cold outside. So why not take this opportunity to take a closer look into the True Terrain snow shader. So we're trying to create a snow landscape and let's start. We are not using nodescapes, we are not using end, we are going to work with displacement this time. So super easy. Create a plane, scale it up by 200, zoom out, and let's add a subdivide to it, and I would say 80 will suffice. And while we're at it, we're going to apply a Smart UV project as well. Okay, so let's head over to our Displacement Modifier. This is usually, if this jumps up, this is usually a sign that I have not applied my scale. So let's remedy that. So we have applied our scale. We've got our displacement modifier and we want a new texture in here. Go to our texture and open up any height map you might have. I'm using this specific one, which is a 4K. You can see 64 megabytes. I will add a link to the description of this video so you can download it if you want to create the same landscape as I do. Okay, let's open this up and go back to our displacement modifier, and you see if we're changing this, it's not looking the way we want because we need to change our coordinates to UV and the UV map we have created before. So let's do 100, so that's our rough terrain right now. And you can see that with the default mid-level at 0.5, the base of the terrain is below the 0 point. It's not an issue normally for True Terrain, but when we are working with the snow height and we want to modify that, it could get a little bit tricky. So to avoid that, we're just putting the mid-level to 0, and so our landscape sits flat on the ground. So let's find a proper view on our landscape. So something like this, for example, could look fine. Maybe even more like so, I think. Right. I have already set up my standard Nishita sky texture. Don't forget, I'm using -3 in the exposure here. But what we're going to change now is, first of all, this is high in the mountains, so and we're working with real world scale, so let's put this up to like 6,000 meters. Not very realistic, but whatever. And up there we've got less air, so let's reduce the air a little bit, get rid of the dust and increase the ozone a bit. So what we're getting is nice dark blue, like this one. Play with the camera angle a little bit more. So we do have some sky in here, so something like this, and rotate the sun maybe like so, make the shadows a little bit shorter by increasing the sun elevation. Right, okay, now this doesn't look very good, and what we need to do is go into True Terrain and add a Subsurface Modifier. And what I'm going to do is do a 2 on the viewport and a 4 in the render. You can do an adaptive. No, we're sticking with this one because, and this is something we're going to double check in a second. As always, we're going to add a material. Let's just take this one for the principal setup. I go with 100 and with 0.3. Get rid of the OO map, and let's take a look how this looks like when it's rendered. Hit F12, so we can see the difference between the viewpoint, subdiv, and what's actually coming out of the render. And you can see it's more pronounced. This is more roundish and smooth, and this has a little bit more edge to it. And so we need probably, no, the scale here we can set to 5, and then this is far too much, so 0.3 should work properly. Make this a little bit smaller, 2. So again, let's do a quick render and see what the difference is between our subdiv viewport and final render. Yes, as you can see, it's more pronounced. We've got more, this is more flat, and we've got more geometry, or seemingly more geometry in here. So I think that's actually fine as it is. But I think we get different results if we get the subdiv in front of the displacement. Let's do another render, and I think this looks much more mountainous. So we will stick with that. Let's see. Yeah. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so we can work with that. We have now, with our subdiv on the viewport level, we have 100,000 faces, which is okay for my system and should be okay for most all the systems as well. Make this a little bit bigger and get rid of the texture here, although the settings look okay to me. I'm now, for this one, I'm going to use custom materials. What are custom materials? These are materials, maps I got over time into my collection and have integrated into True Terrain, so I can use them here. It's a super easy process. You probably all know how to do it. If there is someone out there wanting me to show you how that it's done, that's like a 2-minute video. That would be no problem at all. So what we're going to do for the first ground here is take a sort of, snowy grass ground texture. Usually it would come in like that, and that's because I have not imported a proper AO map, but that's an easy fix. Just switch it off and you should be fine. Texture size, displacement strength, that looks all good to me. Maybe even do it a little bit smaller, like so. Okay, then let's go with a secondary ground. So before we do this, we go into the blend settings. Black is the secondary ground, so let's open this up. So we want less black, or the black a little bit differently scattered. So the amount of patches, if I'm increasing that, it gets more noisy, and it gets bigger if I'm going down like so. 0.3 sounds okay, looks good. If the mask expansion gives me another way to manage the amount of visible second. So 0.2, I think. And then that's great with the advanced mapping over here. We can actually move those around and get them over here, because yeah, that looks good, because these parts will be textured with cliffs, so it's actually a shame to put a very nicely matched ground and secondary ground in there, because it will be overlaid by the cliff texture anyhow. So let's take a look how this looks like. Of course it will not look good because we have not applied a proper texture or anything else. So what we're going to do is go back to ground, go to copy values to the secondary, so at least that's right, and go back to our secondary ground and find something. So I think we could go with something that gives us a little bit of green in there. Let's go with this one. Okay, but let's get rid of the blend options, go back into the settings. I think that one has a proper, yep, has a proper AO map. We can work with that. And in the texture mapping, I think we should be, let's go bigger and see what that looks like. Yeah, maybe we can, let's try this setting, like with 75. And you know what? Give it a quick render and see with the different subdiff level what kind of result we are getting. Let's see. Not too bad, not too bad. But let's decide if we're going to keep that texture after we have applied our cliff texture. So put our cliffs in here. They work well, however I don't want them to be that massive on these rocks and mountains. So what we're going to do is go into our blending setting, basic, mixed detail. We don't need the ground cut off. Open up the show advanced settings as well. So usually I go with 0.25. That makes this a little bit more confined and refined. What happens if we do an edge bleed of 0? Well, we only have cliff, and this will make it more constrained to the face is selected. If we're using extra details, we got some additional noise in here. I think we can keep that as it is. Let's take a look on where the cliff texture is now. That looks good to me. Now let's go to the secondary ground. Let's take these values, copy values to cliffs, and then go to our cliffs and find something that works for there. I want something dark, and that's, yeah, I want something dark and picking something very bright. So let's go with this one and see, first of all, do we have a prop? Yes, we can work with the AO shader and increase the AO map intensity. That makes the map darker, which is what I'm looking for. And then the texture mapping should be addressed as well. Maybe make it even bigger here. And increase the displacement strength to 0.5 to get real, blockiness in here. We still get these artifacts in here. You know what? Let's do a quick test render and see what we can get. And some of you might think that's already a nice snow landscape. Well, it's not, of course. And as you can see, we have more geometry. I think we need to decrease the displacement on the cliffs a little bit. It's a little bit too much detail in here, and it yeah, or we should increase the amount of the texture size. So let's go to slot 2 so we can compare it. Go back in here. Now we have two options: displacement strength or texture size, or both. So what happens if we go to 50? And that's what we're going to test out and compare it to the first render. I think this already looks better. One, see all the details in here, and two, a little bit more refined. You can play with this. This is an artistic choice, but right now I like what I see here. And so it's finally time to add the snow shader. Snow. Click to use. And it's a lot of bulky snow. And even if we would render that, it would not look that great. So let's go to slot 3 and exactly do that. See what happens. Yeah, okay, we can already see that's not what we want. I think there's no use to actually have this render out, so let's stop that. Okay, why is it that blocky? So I have found that when you're opening up the settings, you got a lot of different submenus, and everything does something differently. But the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the displacement values. So remember, or you don't have to remember, let's go back and take a look at our 3 maps. So let's close the blending. Ground. Displacement strength 3. Ground secondary 0.3. Cliffs 0.5. Now at snow, the default settings are 2 and 1. So these are obviously too large. So let's go with the same, well, go between the ground textures and the cliff textures, which would be 0.4. and immediately it looks much better. That's the first one. Let's go with 4, do a quick render. And this is, I'm working in Blender 3.0 beta, and it just massively increases my workflow in rendering. So I'm probably not going back to 2.9. And this is what we get. And I think this already looks pretty good. And we could stop here. However, it'll be a shame because we just see the cliffs and we see some snow. So let's play a little bit with what other options we have here. So what's the first thing? The shader setting. Here we only have an on-off switch, which is the Subsurface Scattering, which makes the rendering a little bit slower, but you can see on the viewport it provides an icy, snowy subsurface layer or a color scheme to it, and we will definitely render with this. The final render will be with this turned on, but right now it would slow us down, so we're not using it. Height of snow, that was the one I was telling you about. Right now it says snow start in meters 0, which means it starts where the map starts, but it actually means it starts where the 0 point is. So we would have, although it's not possible to go down in the negative, if we would have, and let's just show you this, this was 0.5, and if we move our camera like here, you can see it starts at the 0 point and it's not going downwards. So we would actually have to manually override this and put -10 in here, so the snow would go down. You cannot move the mouse at -50, so we have the full landscape covered. It's not necessary to do so, so let's go back here to mid-level 0, go back to our camera view as we have set it up, and go in here. And because we've got nice ground textures, we should actually lift the skirt of the snow a little bit. So if we're doing that, you can see the snow start gets lifted up to, and the softness of cutoff, if we go do that 1, which is the most soft transition between the snow map and the underlying map, let's go with 0.7 and then lower this again like so. So we can actually have a view on the underlying ground textures as well. Looks good, but that's not the point. I want to show you what each individual section does. Now we have set, then we've got another one which says snow slopes. So let's see what happens if I'm going to move this. And you can already see in the viewport, we are moving in between -45 and +45, where the snow is actually applied on our mesh. So once in a while, take a look. Looks good, absolutely. But again, all these values now are your artistic choice. The only thing I want to recommend is take a closer look on what the displacement in general is doing, because I have found that sometimes those values have a negative displacement effect on the snow. So for example, let's see. You can't see it right now, but if you think that, or maybe if we do the y-axis as well, do it like this. Doesn't look that brilliant, but here is a great example. You can see like how the snow gets pushed inside of the mesh. So what you can do about this is go to your displacement values and change the mid-level. So let's go to 0.5. And that's already too much because it's now pushing outwards very strangely. So 0.2. Yeah, it's still, well, maybe it was 0.5. Let's see. That's obviously 0.4 or something like that. I'm not saying you have to do this, but if you think that the snow kind of looks weird, yeah, 0.4 would be the right one. However, I don't want to use those snow slopes, but go with what we had before. You could also, you know, play with the show crevices, but focuses on the edges and nooks, and you can immediately see what those values are doing. You don't actually need to follow my tutorial here or follow along, because you've got eyes, right? You can see what these things are doing. And brighten snow, a little bit misleading. It does not brighten the snow. It is something that is based on the brightness, but is actually a map modifier of the snow slope map. So and you can get very weird, or no, sorry, artistic results with that as well. So let's go back to our standard values. So that was snow slopes that we have addressed as well. Wind influence, same thing. It just changes the way snow is applied to your mesh. You can have random slope coverage on 2 separate levels. You can go into the minus as well and get something like this, which actually looks pretty good as well. However, I see, you know, here the snow gets indented as well. Maybe 0.4 mid-level will save us. Yeah, looks good. However, I don't like the snow just, it makes the mountains here a little bit flat, at least in my eyes. So let's get rid of the wind as well. Snow geometry details, activate the details. That one I like quite a lot, because without changing anything, just take a look what it does. So again, maybe let's wait until this is rendered in the viewpoint. Take a look at this section here, and if we activate the details, you get the snow into the very fine cracks of each of the maps and of the cliffs. So this is something I like. So maybe we can leave that on. What happens if we take remove snow? Well, it does what it says. Effect influence make it very small. Go like this. And we've got the cavity snow again, turn it on, and you have a very subtle, just in the crevices and cavities of your mesh, applied snow. You can increase the threshold and get additional snow in here, like so. It's just a different sort of snow on your mesh. And the more I'm doing this, the more I'm not sure we will have this bright green as the secondary ground. But let's see, and the minimum we can do is like 6. Go with this, and the final mask is just reduce overall snow, which I'm not really sure what it does. Soften snow mask, of course. You can see the snow is not as pronounced laying on your mesh, because it's much more blatant, and you can see here it's a very harsh line, so that's not what we want. Let's go back to this one, maybe make it even a little bit more soft here. And we're back to the displacement values, mapping, overall amount of details. So what happens if we go to 0? Well, it wasn't that obvious. What happens if we go to 10? Not that obvious as well. So what we're going to do is Control B, put the selection here. We've got, let's do a short render with 0. Should be done very quickly. And then do another slot and do one with overall amount of details with 50. And compare those two renders. Okay, let's take a look. 5, that was with 50, and that was with 0. I don't see that much of a difference. I'm pretty sure there is one, and maybe because what I have found is that some options, well, there is some small difference. You can see something changing in here. But you know what, let's keep it at the default value, because I have found if you activate some of these things, others are kind of negated. So again, Control B, do the whole thing, and yeah, let's go with this one. However, I don't think we will use the green thingy here. Maybe this one is more subtle. It is, but it looks crap, so it means I have not put a proper AO map in here. So let's switch this off and yeah, go with this one. I think that's a little bit better. And in the end, let's go to snow, because again, and increase the mid-level of the snow a little bit more, so like 0.6, so we have more volume and height. Let's go with 1. increase the big mount intensity to 5. I wouldn't mind having a little bit more snow over here. So maybe if I'm deactivating the cavity snow, yes. However, we can already see that our mid-level is now too large. Let's go back to 0.4. I'm happy with that. So let's give that a render. And I hope that I was able to explain to you or show to you how I'm addressing such a scene and what the various possibilities to change your snow is actually doing. So looks okay. It's okay for the time being. However, I think we can pep this up a bit. You don't have to stick around now. For now, it's just playing with additional assets and putting things into this scene to make it a little bit more interesting. So the first thing, and I think all of you will agree, is we need some clouds in here. So of course we can do an HDRI, but I'm in the great position to have purchased True Vdb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick clouds, and I'm using the optimal version, which is the best setting between fastness and details. So deactivate everything, or deselect, add the volume, go to non-rendered view so we can actually position this like so. We can see how this looks like. Maybe make it a little bit smaller, put this into the back, make it larger again, maybe even put some of the peaks into the cloud, and let's see what that will give us. Looks okay. However, let's go to the material settings in here. It's too dense in my view, so let's go with 0.05 and make it a little bit smaller as well. And go over here, select the objects, all objects, click Alt D, so we're not duplicating it, but you know, making a mirror image which should not have any impact on our overall, like so, overall mesh count or vertex count. Let's take a look on how this looks. Get rid of the overlays. And I think we could do with a little bit of shadow in here. Make it a little bit more 3D. Scattering gives us additional color, the hue as well. Need to turn up the saturation. areas like so. Select the hierarchy, overlays back on, move this over here, maybe down a bit, like so. Rotate it. I mean, you can play around with this as much as you want. And this one, again, select the hierarchy and move this over here, make it a bit bigger, like a little smaller, like so. Okay, these are fine. Let's hide them for now, because now, going back in here, we will give, yeah, I want some snowy trees in here as well, which is easily done. So go to assets, go to trees, and we've got, as far as I know, spruce trees come with the ability to put snow on them, so let's add them, which is far too much. And the modifiers don't work properly now in 3.0 beta, but I can still make them work kind of. So the first thing is camera mask. I have only one camera in there, so it's only in the camera. I want a slope mask, and I'm picking this area, which means just areas that are pretty flat should have trees in them, something like this. That's actually okay. I will go back, so that's actually it. So going in here, I will increase this to 4, and although these are properly scaled, I want them to be a little bit more visible, so I'm going to put 1 and 1.3, something like this, and yeah, that makes sense. And in what else do we have to do? First of all, yeah, asset settings, quality settings. I'm activating the LOD, the LOD, and saying I want medium sized trees in the render, and which I don't, because I would not be able to use the shader settings. So let's get rid of this, put medium trees in the scene as it is. Will take a while, but it's already there. Go to the shader. Might take some while to get all the trees in, but we're already in there. And now I'm going to put the snow in here. Actually, it really bugs down my system, so I'm trying to hide the actual geometry, and now I have no problem adding the snow on the needles, and I want snow on the cones as well. And that's it. If all goes well and we do a render, we should have clouds and snowy trees on our snowscape. Now let's give it a try and see if this works. You can fine-tune the size of the textures, the displacement, everything to your liking, but for me now it was important to show you how I would address this, what different values are doing and how my workflow looks like when trying to do a snowscape. And that's the result. I think in post-process maybe an LUT, or you know, increase the contrast or decrease it to your liking. We've got the shadow of this mountain into the clouds, which is pretty cool, I think. Yeah. Bit of details is getting lost in here. So maybe we are going to do a little bit of fine-tuning with the light. It is pretty harsh, so let's move this the other way around. Increase the sun elevation and do another render. That was slot 5. Let's do slot 6 and see which one we like better, because that will be then our title screen on for the video. So while we wait for that, thanks for watching. It's been probably a very long video, but it's just an additional feature of True Terrain, which I mean, makes a lot of fun to experiment and play with. And I hope to see some brilliant artwork from you soon on the Discord server. Catch you there. And I already know that I like that better. Great, that's it. Thanks for watching.